My name is Liz Fisher, and I am calling in from Texas, Austin, Texas, and I was the project lead for Haunts. We are going to be jumping into a brief presentation to show you what we spent the week making. So here we go. So the big idea for Haunts was we wanted to create a mixed reality production that follows a team of ghost hunters through site-specific locations as they seek to uncover the mystery behind certain supernatural phenomenon. We wanted this storyline to follow a branching structure that would actually respond to audience participation. So the audience would have a chance to not only connect and talk to our characters and actors, but they would ultimately decide the course of the narrative, so that direct communication would end up being essential for our story to move forward. Now, the fun part that we really dove into this week was figuring out this ghosts, because the ghosts were going to be a blend of augmented reality, sound design, and old school magic tricks. And our hope was that this entire performance could actually be live streamed for increased accessibility during these COVID times. So, in order to set an achievable set of goals for the hack, we narrowed it down to three very simple ones. Pick a city and a historical event that we were going to use to base our entire story around, clarify the branching structure for that story, and then, bring a ghost to life. Very easy. So now to talk a little bit about the story and the narrative that we constructed over the course of the week, I'm actually going to invite my collaborator, TJ Young, to the virtual stage to talk a little bit about the narrative. TJ?
Hi, everyone. Great. So, I'm here to talk to you about the narrative of Haunt and how we kind of took this branching narrative approach and why we picked the story that we did and how we go about it. The story that we landed on the mystery surrounding the servant girl Annihilator, which was a serial killer in Austin, Texas between the years of 1884 and 1885, killed about 8 people, at least that they attribute to him, and they were killed in their beds at night because of a lot of circumstances, not only unreliable eyewitnesses and the fact that it's 1884 and policing wasn't, the best then, and some of the victims were actually, most all the victims were women, and some of them were African American. These mysteries remain unsolved. So we kind of struggled with the fact that if we're telling these stories about these women, especially these underrepresented women, how are we going to go about that, and why this story is important to us? So one of the big things is that in looking at ghosts, we're able to shift the focus from the killer to the victims, right? We're able to give them some sort of agency in the world, and we're able to interact with them, especially as we continue the conversation around the way that history has treated women and Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We found that this is actually a really nice story to hone in on because, kind of at the basis of it, the way that the ghost hunter can resolve the situation is by speaking their names, right? The fact that their names have been lost to history and why they might not solve these mysteries, they're able to still give some humanity to these victims that are lost. And this is a speculative fiction world, but we wanted it to be able to be based in reality, so that way, if people say, "Is this thing real?" they're able to find some research and then continue on that journey by themselves to learn more about these women, learn more about their past, and also learn. So also they can also continue to say their names as well. Next slide, please, Liz. Great. This is an example of our narrative flow. You will see here that for the most part it stays pretty linear until we hit what I call the dead end node, right? Within these nodes are breakdowns of the information that is obtained throughout the story, location things. It's also where other members of the design team can drop information and we can continue to work on it. But you'll see that at the dead end node, we have a point where we split. And this is actually where we get to the really important part, which is like the induction point, right? Where we have two pieces of technology because we understand that there's going to be a barrier of entry to taking in our story. Not everyone has access to a smartphone as well as a computer screen, so they might not be able to experience the augmented reality portion of it that would push a choice for the audience. So we wanted to give them something else that they could experience. That way they could still participate in communicating with with the actor about the choice they wanted to make. So we separated that into sound and shadow. Where we'll have a demonstration a little bit later where the actor will encounter a sound, and if you don't have augmented reality, that sound is going to inform which decision you make. But then you're also going to be able to encounter a visual shadow, and then you'll be given the choice: do they follow the sound or do they follow the shadow? And then from there, we have some consequences. We have and it just kind of spirals out. But there are 4 unique experiences at the end of it before it all comes back together for a recap. But within that recap are actually consequences of the audience's choice that will carry on to future episodes of this show. Next slide, please. Great. And you get to pick the future, right? This is a narrative-driven audience interaction that's supported by the live stream chat function. A lot of things that we have been looking at are how do we capture that live and exciting sort of feeling that we get from watching live theater, and we're thinking participation, right? And if nothing else, we can say, type in, do I follow the sound or do I follow the shadow, right? Something that we can look at really quickly, and then we can give that the actor that information either through the chat function and the technology that they're live streaming through, via a text, 1,000 different ways to let the actor know, hey, this is the path that we're going on. And all of the deciding factors in that inflection point happen by this inflection point stimuli, right? So these things are activated. We are looking at those stimuli as a core mechanic in our storytelling. So a lot of times we will, as we're working with like our live magician, as we're building our story, we say, okay, we have this sort of point where we can branch off. What do you think is going to be a good idea? And then we kind of build the story middle out, as I like to call it. Right, we take the information about what we know is capable within the space, with the actor that we have, with the limitations that we have, and then we build the narrative and bookend it from there. So that way we are not writing impossible situations for our actor. We're keeping them safe, especially in COVID times. And we're also making something that we know that our AR team can accomplish, our sound team can accomplish, and the actor can accomplish in a seamless way, so that way we aren't sitting here for months and months trying to perfect something that just doesn't work. It seems easier for us to bend narrative around our limitations, which aren't limitations but rather opportunities, than as for a narrative to impose restrictions around the technology and the action. So yeah, that's kind of how we have landed on our narrative structure.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, TJ. I really appreciate all that. So now we're going to pivot a little bit and talk about what it means to try to bring ghosts to life in this context. So as we've already said, ghosts in this production would manifest as a combination of augmented reality, magic, and sound. And in the blending of these 3, they can work both as a tandem in order to create an entire sort of spectral entity, or as isolated events, which gives us a little more flexibility in our narrative structure, allowing us to sort of pick and choose what sort of experience works best for each moment. Now, specifically for this hack, we decided to really key into the sound and the AR elements, because we wanted to take advantage of the incredible resources and mentors that tMoRPH provided us. So our experience today doesn't unfortunately incorporate magic, but don't forget about it because it will come along later. So another really important part of developing this technology for us was about figuring out how it fit into the narrative. And TJ already spoke very eloquently about that. But I just also wanted to point out one other thing that we have considered and are building into our sort of narrative structure, which is this idea of training the audience. Because of course, our augmented reality is coming through a phone or a tablet, and having those audience members be very clear about when they need to raise that phone or tablet up to the live stream could be a little clunky. And it is our goal to instead make sure that the entire thing is sort of wrapped in the frame of the narrative, so that from the beginning, the audiences are learning that your phone isn't just a phone, it's actually a detection device. So that this is actually built into the structure of the story. It's explained by our characters and actually starts to help build our world before we get into any of the essential plot points. So we have been thinking a lot about what this training, sort of putting quotation marks around that, looks like, not only from the very beginning when an audience is trying to download the phone, walking through the very basic user implementation of it, and then also creating very distinct, not only like bits of dialogue, but visual and auditory triggers so the audience can know when they should start lifting up their phones to look for our augmented reality ghosts. TJ also spoke about this, about our concerns about accessibility, recognizing, of course, the immense privilege that it means for someone to be able to have two devices, but also constraints around bandwidth. So while live streaming is something that we are definitely interested in because of all of our backgrounds in live theater and desperately wanting to get back into a place when we can all be in rooms together again, that obviously isn't possible for us in this moment. So that live stream would also be able to be captured and played back by folks times beyond the initial live stream so they could take part in the play and enjoy their ghost hunt for themselves. So let's get to the fun stuff. Let's show you what we've actually made and stop talking quite so much. So just a little bit of context for what you're about to see. We actually decided to basically create a short performance that represents that first inflection point that TJ talked about earlier. This would also be the first sort of full instance of our ghost, both in sound and augmented reality in the midst of the performance. So this video I'm about to show you illustrates also a lot of the elements of what we would expect our live stream experience to be, because we wanted to sort of model it after a little bit of that sort of Blair Witch docu-style feel. So we have the direct address to the camera, handheld cinematography, and we were also very fortunate to be able to shoot this scene on site. So there's our inflection point. Here we go.
So, this is where the address should have been. Let me look real quick. Right. All right. Now that's 3. That would be 7. So 5 would be here. It's like nothing here, look. Not even a sign of where they lived or anything, which kinda sucks. But you know, progress and all that crap. This feels like a dead end. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm going to head back. Maybe I missed something. Do you see anything?
So obviously we did not get to see our AR ghosts in that moment, but we did get to show you a little bit of what it would look like when the ghosts would, what the types of markers that our audience would be looking for when a ghost shows up. Now we did actually build the app, and this next video I'm going to show you sort of cuts to just that little end portion where the ghost is supposed to show up. So y'all can see what it looks like when that AR filter comes in. Something else that I just wanted to point out in that video that might be apparent to folks who are listening in with maybe awesome speakers or great headphones, A lot of the sound in this is actually super directional because we were trying to make sure that audiences could very clearly distinguish the area of the shadow versus the area of the sound. So big shout out to Alan, our team member, who helped us develop all of that. So let me jump back real quick. And now we're going to show you a film of what the AR looks like in the midst of the live stream.
I don't know what to do. I'm going to head back. Maybe I missed something.
So there's a little taste of what an audience member would actually experience when they are able to download the app and watch part of the live stream to sort of witness our ghosts. Big props in this moment to Patrick, who created our ghost through some fabulous green screen and motion capture work. So great job on that, Pat. So let's talk a little bit about like, where do we go from this after this intense and beautiful week? What happens next? We're hoping to continue developing this story. Obviously, this week was a lot about trying to get together a really tight little scene that we could execute and execute well, but there's the rest of the story that we really want to dig into, not only continuing to build out the narrative structure, but building out our AR. And one of the ideas that we talked about early on was instead of having to have our target image as that overlay in the video, exploring how we might be able to embed visible targets inside of the live stream to make it feel a little bit more magical. And then also playing with the dimensionality of the ghosts, of the augmented reality ghosts, so that maybe they're not just those two-dimensional ones that live only inside of the screens, but perhaps come out into the audience's world and continue to follow them through their everyday life. Obviously, we didn't have much time this week to dig into magic, but that is something that we're still really excited to play with and see how magic now fits with our sound and augmented reality. And then also starting to look at how obviously today's performance was all pre-recorded, which makes things a little bit easier, but being able to add those same types of live manipulations of video that you saw in our pre-recorded bit just there to give that same feel in a full performance. And then the last thing that we're really excited about, since this project sort of came out of a desire to talk about stories from specific communities that have maybe been forgotten about time, since now is an especially important time in our history to look at those old stories and why we need to go back and think about them and retell them. Figuring out how we could actually use this sort of team of ghost hunters to go from city to city, exploring very specific stories that live inside of those communities and building that piece for each individual community. So here's the list of incredible collaborators that I had the good fortune to work with this week. I'm so grateful for all of their time, all of their energy, all of their smarts. It was an intense but unforgettable time. So big thanks to all of them for their help. And of course, thanks tMoRPH. It's been a pleasure.
Ha 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 ha!